in the form which he preferred. He had a quick and lively fancy, and a mind of almost unequaled ingenuity and readiness. Arguments and analogies never fail him. Probably no writer has produced so many striking maxims. But it is not his imagination or his dialectic skill which has given him the immense and abiding influence which he has in fact exercised in Latin Christianity. This he owes to a combination of dialectic power with an earnestness in believing, a conviction of the lost condition of those who deliberately reject the gifts which Christ has left in his Church, a knowledge of the human heart, a devoutness, tenderness and sympathy, such as has fallen to the lot of few. It would be too much to say that his treatment of great questions is always adequate and satisfactory. His extraordinary skill in reply seems sometimes to have hidden even from himself the real force of the statement which he answers; and, writing as he did in haste and with warmth, he found in cooler moments many things in his own works which he wished to withdraw or modify. But, take him for all in all, no writer in the Latin Church was ever endowed with more brilliant gifts or used them with greater zeal for the glory of God than St. Augustin. An excellent instance of a man of wealth and culture brought to forsake the world is Paulinus of Nola, who was born at Bordeaux of a wealthy and distinguished Roman family. While still in Bordeaux he was a pupil of the poet Ausonius, a friend of his father's. In 379 he was consul, and everything seemed to promise him a brilliant secular career, when a new influence turned him aside. He was greatly struck by the veneration paid to Christian martyrs. Martin of Tours and Ambrose gained great influence on his mind, and he was seized with a great anxiety, lest the last day should overtake him while engaged in things that profit not. When a much longed for child was taken away after a few days' life, he and his wife, who was also rich, agreed to sell what they had and give to the poor, and so to withdraw from the peril of riches and from the deceitful world. His family were greatly troubled, but Martin was delighted with the man who had supplied an almost unique example of obedience to a hard precept of the Gospel. In a hospice which they had built in Nola he and his wife spent their days in the most rigorous self-mortification. But in all his austerity Paulinus retained his naturally kindly and genial character. Friend as he was of Jerome and Augustine, he did not break with Rufinus and Pelagius. His writings consist of letters and poems, often of great interest for the history of the time as well as for the life of the poet himself. It is curious to see the utmost rudeness of life recommended in the language of courtly and artificial poetry, almost as if Quakerism had been preached in the style of Pope. He was chosen Bishop of Nola in the year 409 and died there in 431. Another Latin poet, like Paulinus, of distinguished family and engaged in early years in affairs of state, was the Spaniard Prudentius. He, feeling as he grew old that the pursuits of which he had been engaged were such as profit not in the day of judgment, set himself to hymn, in a style imitative of the old Roman poets, the heroes of the noble family of martyrs, and even to inveigh in verse against the enemies of Christian truth. Leo, the first pope of that name, was also the first pope of whom we know any literary productions. It was during his tenure of the papacy that he delivered the sermons which have come down to us. If they have not Augustine's wealth of thought nor Ambrose's eloquence, they are written in a style which is good for its time, clear, vigorous, and by no means commonplace. He attains perhaps his highest eloquence when he speaks of that See of Rome which he had himself done so much to raise to power over the Church. Leo's letters are also of the highest interest as documents of Church history, but these should perhaps be regarded rather as despatches from the papal chancery than as the work of the Pope himself. In any case they are well written. Severinus Boethius, a Roman philosopher and statesman, holds a place apart in the history of the Church. Born in Rome, he rose to high place and dignity under the great king of the East Goths, Theoderic. Falling, however, under suspicion of a treasonable correspondence with the court of Byzantium, he was cast into prison, and in the year 525 was put to death. During his captivity he wrote his treatise on the Consolation of Philosophy, which though it rather breathes the spirit of the old Roman Stoicism than of Christianity, brought to its author the reputation of a great theologian, and was much studied in the Middle Ages as the work of "that holy soul who maketh manifest the cheating world to him who hears aright." Medieval readers probably found in him something which was wanting in the scholastic theology. In Pavia, where he was buried, he has even been venerated under the title of St Severnius, and the papal Congregation de Riti in 1884 expressly allowed this cultus. His translations and explanations of some of the treatises of Aristotle greatly influenced the philosophy of the schoolmen. It is doubtful whether he was really the author of the dogmatic treatises attributed to him. CHAPTER XI.